Well, first I want to thank Max and Emily for putting this on. I just want to say it's really cool to be in a room full of so many smart, talented people. It's just like gushing out. You can feel it. Very recently, within the last year, we passed a date that my childhood self felt was always going to be ages away, which was the date October 21st, 2015. This is, of course, the date that Doc and Marty traveled to in Back to the Future Part 2. Now, when that date passed, I was very intrigued by the discrepancies between the future that was projected in the 1980s and the future that we actually now live in. There's something fascinating about the 80s future, the future that was projected in the 1980s. And I think it's because science fiction that was made at that time was just beginning to feel the influence of the information revolution. It's really only in the early 80s and late 70s that personal computers really started to enter the mainstream. And so the public consciousness, the mass consciousness, is starting to be affected by this, by the science fiction that was made at that time. And you can see that in particularly the novel William Gibson's novel Neuromancer. This is a phrase from the novel. His buyer for the 3 megabytes of hot RAM in the Hitachi wasn't taking calls. At that time, the word RAM must have sounded pretty science fiction-y. But to us, of course, this is an everyday occurrence. This is a real concern. The memory on your phone. So I started to be interested in the way that as we actually enter the computer-dominated society that these people 20, 30 years ago were imagining, how does that juxtapose against the reality that they imagined? A contemporary art movement called Vaporwave starts to explore some of these questions. You might be familiar with it. It's very popular on Tumblr. They take imagery, techno-optimistic imagery from the late century, and present it in a way that is ironic or sarcastic to explore more further the connotations. So what I decided to do was I decided to take sentences and quotes from these novels from the 80s and 90s and randomly reblog them on Tumblr against vaporwave images, against glitch art images. And I have some examples that I would like to share. But first, I imagine you may be interested in knowing how it works. So if you are not aware, Tumblr has an API that they open up that allows developers to pull tags, pull posts based on tags. So I am pulling several posts with a tag that I am calling. And I chose Vaporwave as my tag. I have this set on a cron task that runs every 15 minutes, and I send in various different tags that I have decided are trying to match the aesthetic that I'm going for. Vaporwave being one of them, glitch art being another one, webpunk is another one. I take the post, and if the post is within the timestamp that I have defined, which is like 10 minutes, because I don't want to be spamming everybody with a bunch of posts from the last hour, you can grab about 20 posts in each API call. And then I reblog it with a random comment. And so the random comments are, in another method, pulled from this giant string that I have of a bunch of different novels. Neuromancer by William Gibson is one of them. Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson is another. I know we've got some fans out there for Neil Stephenson. And then it's just intriguing to me the way that these images are juxtaposed against the sentences that people in that time period were inventing to imagine the future. And I collected a few interesting examples. Sometimes it can be kind of weird. Other times, I notice it can be kind of intriguing. This one, for example, it is so vast and complicated that no one sees more than 10% of it. You could spend a year watching it over and over again and keep seeing new things. So I did not come up with this sentence. I didn't write this sentence. I did not come up with this image. But together, to me, there's something new about it that is captured. The futurism of the late century juxtaposed against the glitch art, the actual art that is actually made in the actual 21st century on computers. Here's another example, and this one's a GIF. So this is just a screenshot from the blog, but animated, you can see how the zeros strobed again, and a message stuttered there in the corner of her vision, chopped up by the display circuit. Interesting. And then sometimes it's uncanny. Half a dozen NYPD tactical hovercraft responding to the possibility of Blue 9 in the building's ventilation system. We're converging on the SenseNet pyramid. See, this is totally random. So I'm doing this every 15 minutes. So of course, humans being what we are, we like to find things that make sense in the chaos. And here's one example. What has the impact been? So another parameter that you can pull from the API is the amount of followers you have at any given moment. So every time that I post, I'm also pulling the followers and collecting that in a text file, and probably it should be in a relational database or something, but I'm not doing that. So anyway, I started with about 55 followers. Over time, I have gained now about 2,500 followers. And then at this point right here, someone told me it was too spammy, so I kind of reduced the amount of times that it was blogging per day, and that actually had a massive impact on the rate of change here. So what have been some of the responses? They're in a lot of different categories. A lot of people say, what are you? What are you doing? Where do your captions come from? I find this to be interesting because literally if you take any of the sentences and Google them, you will find the text documents where I got the sentences from. Other people find it disrespectful what I'm doing and irritating. And I've actually been asked to not reblog several people a couple times, and I have respected that. Everyone who has ever asked me not to reblog them, they've been added to a watch list where I will not reblog them if that's their blog that is pulled. However, I've also received feedback from people saying that my script is exposing unknown glitch artists. Hi, just wanted to thank you for the exposure, considering all you seem to be getting in your inbox is people complaining. Hey fam, you've reblogged a couple of my things, and the notes always fly in when you do. Thanks. So it's encouraging to see that there is a positive response to this, that people are interested in it. At first I really didn't know what I was doing or why. It just kind of seemed cool, but it looks like I am now a somewhat well-known blog in the glitch art tag, and I'm exposing people who otherwise would have had no exposure. So what are some potential applications? So I haven't actually done this, but I speculate that this is possible. So in the future, I imagine that it might be cool to, every single time you take a post, to collect the tags that are on that particular post, and then start to record over time the amount of times those tags are used. And probably if you're into like marketing and marketing analysis, you could start to figure out what kind of tags are organically evolving in any social community. For example, and I just made up this data, what if I had been looking for every single tag associated to a Vaporwave post, and then I collected it, and then over time I said, hey, it looks like the Simpson wave thing is starting to come up out of nowhere. Maybe we should start to tag our stuff with Simpson wave so people will start to see us. That's just one thing potentially you could do. I haven't started to do this, but I did draw a comic about two people in a startup doing that exact same thing, which you can also view on my website. Thank you. That's all I've got for you.